get home and fight for our country, the freedom of our country. Now you ask me about the attitude back home. That was kept from us. We didn't know that Berkeley University was carrying on back then, and University of Pennsylvania was going on, and all these students were rebelling against us. Oh no, that was never allowed to be told us or shown us while we were in Vietnam. That was kind of taboo.
So, do you expect to have dramatically changed the soldiers' opinions if they had found out about the attitude back home and the feedback, or do you think just that purpose, that strong purpose, do you think that would have just carried you guys throughout it, or do you think the atmosphere back home would have changed the...
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, to be honest with you. I know when we got back home, it was totally different. But to stay on this subject, I don't think it would have made any difference, none whatsoever, to be honest with you, as I think back. Because we were fighting, again, for the purpose to come home, to stay alive. Now, what these idiots were doing back here, protesting and all this, if we would have found that out, it probably would not have made much difference to the fighting soldier, and Marine, Air Forceman, Air Corpsman, or Navy guy there, because we didn't have time to focus on this. We were fighting war. This is serious business. War is not a game. It's a very, very serious business. And we didn't have time to focus on what you would call what they were doing back home. I had to focus every day on getting out of bed and staying alive to go to bed that night. I did not have time to worry about some jerk at Berkeley University and what he was thinking. I didn't give a damn what he was thinking.
Yeah, I respect that. I mean, I could see why too. It's just like they may be thinking that, but you probably know your family isn't thinking that. They're hoping you come home too.
It's absolutely correct.
Yeah. So I'm going to go on to this question that is kind of on that topic. Do you think the way when you got back home, do you think it was justified, or do you think it was complete bogus or whatever? Or do you think it was justified the way some people were treated back home after just fighting the war, just fighting every day to stay alive, and then coming back and finding people with hatred when they don't really know the full situation?
Well, coming back to start at the beginning. Absolutely not. It was not justified. There was absolutely no reason for the Vietnam vet to be treated the way they were when we came back home. Let me give you some examples real quickly, because I think as a young man, you need to know what happened to us when we came home. And here's what happened. I got off of the plane in Oakland, California, and then when I got off of the plane, I had to come down a long corridor from the plane into the building that we were being welcomed home by. And there was probably 100, 150 protesters outside. And they were throwing bottles of urine at us. They were throwing feces at us. They were throwing firecrackers at us to make us jump because we had just came out of a combat zone. They were calling us baby killers. They were calling us murderers. Now you got to remember something. We weren't on a hostile ground. We were now home. This was home to us. This is what we were fighting for. We were fighting for those idiots up on that hill. We gave them the freedom to do that nonsense they were doing. Reluctant? Absolutely we were reluctant. What did it do to our attitude? I hated this country when I came home. 20 minutes after I was home, I would have just soon got back on the plane and went back to Vietnam, and this country could have floated away as far as I cared. Because that's how I felt then. That's how I felt then. We didn't have ticker tape parades. We didn't have bands playing. We didn't have presidents flying in and saying, "Welcome home." Oh no. No. We were kicked out of bars because we were Vietnam veteran. We weren't allowed to have a drink. We were spit on and thrown at, things thrown at us. That's what happened to the Vietnam vet. And that's how we were treated.
It's just not right, because I feel like when you're in that war, you're so emotionally and like physically tense. They're used to fighting and all that. And besides other disrespectful means, I also feel like the firecrackers is so wrong, because like you've been fighting there all your lives. You've been at the slightest noise that is hostile or out of the ordinary. It's a flinch reaction. It's what is happening. Get ready.
Absolutely, and that's
then-
why they did what they did.
Yeah.
That's why they threw the firecrackers. That's why they threw all this other stuff at us to make us do that kind of stuff. And also, they really wanted us to commit acts of violence against them, for we could go to jail. That's what they wanted. They wanted us in jail because they thought we were criminals. We just got done killing people 3 days before. We just got done doing things that we shouldn't have did. They think, but how do you fight a war? You don't write love letters back and forth. That's not how it's done. They don't give you a rifle. They don't give you a pistol. They don't give you grenade launchers, grenades, and everything else to go write love letters to the Vietnamese. That's not how it worked.
Very so much. So, how was your family affected, and as a whole, during and after the war? Just about you being overseas, and again, a really important topic back home. And I'm guessing they were loving, but how did it affect them during and after the war? And what are your thoughts on that?
That's an excellent question. My family was a loving family, and they were very, very, very appreciative and very protective of me when I came home, and they were very supportive for me. My dad was a World War II veteran. He's a combat veteran as well. He was a Jeep driver for one of the generals, and my dad was also wounded there. He's a Purple Heart recipient, and he knew some of the things that I went through. Although remembering something, every war was different. World War I was different than World War II. World War II was different than Korea. Korea is different than Vietnam. Vietnam's different than Afghanistan and Kuwait and all the other things that we went through. So when I got home, my family was a little more military orientated. So I was a little more particular, like you. You come from a military family. So if you ever have to go to war, your parents are going to be more acceptable of you. Now you have to remember something. My parents didn't know who I was when I came back. When I left, I was a 17-year-old young man. I came back a 20-year-old grown fighting Marine. There's a big difference. A big difference. They had no idea who was even in their house. None whatsoever. So it was a big culture shock for them. It was a big shock to have me home every day. They were happy I was there, but I got to tell you, I think they were somewhat frightened of what I could do, might do, or would do.
Okay. So, and with that, so do you think these outbreaks or whatever from, again, college students and just people who disrespected the vendors when they got home, do you think it's because they weren't so oriented with the military and probably didn't have vets as families? They just had what they knew from media and Washington and like leaked things. Do you think they just knew those things and didn't truly have probably family members or people to actually ask how was it or what had really happened?
Well, that's an excellent question, and this gives me an opportunity here, and I'm going to take it for a minute. The Vietnam War was widely media controlled. Now, what did the people back here see? Every day, my parents saw firefights in the field. Every day. So these college students that were calling me baby killer and all of this, they got to see the Vietnamese were attacking me, and my men, me and the people around me. So they knew that we were fighting for our life. They didn't care. They didn't care. They just did not care. What they cared about was this thing called peace and love. Well, okay, peace and love is great in its time, but war is hell. Period. Now, were they misinformed? No. They saw the media every day. They knew what was going on. And you cannot tell me that every one of those protesters had no family member at all that was ever in Vietnam or friends of people that were in Vietnam, they knew what was going on. They just did not care. It was the era, it was the time, and they didn't care. So they protested against it. They really, really thought, listen, you have to understand something here. I believe that they really believed I was a baby killer. Are you kidding me? They really believed that I went over there and just murdered people. You've got to be joking me. That's ridiculous. But that's what they thought. They believed that. And mainly, I think they believed it because they wanted to believe that. That settled their own mind that they could have a reason to go protest against something. And they did. They protested the war, they protested the president, they protested just like they're doing today. It's the same thing. There's not much difference in the Afghanistan veteran coming back today as there was the Vietnam veteran. The only different thing of it is if we have a different understanding now of where we're at and why we're doing. Listen, there's people right now that does not want us in Afghanistan, just like they didn't want us in Vietnam. But they're still going to protest over it. They're going to scream, holler, and jump up and down. But the Vietnam vet really, really took a beating. We took a beating when we came back here, and I even mean physically in some cases.
Yeah, and just, I think it's so wrong too, because like, you've been fighting, again, I want to say, you're fighting more, you're fighting to survive every day.
Every day.
No, like, kind
and
of.
not only every day, not to interrupt you, but every second of that day. It's non-stop.
Yeah, and just, you're fighting, and you're fighting to go home, and that's why you soon, when you're going back home, you're going to be greeted with a little bit of love now that you're finally stopped fighting you did so well for this country. And I just hate that some people will convince themselves just to have a stronger resolve of something they knew was wrong, but now don't, just because they felt like, oh, might as well be an attention hog or whatever, just to make a statement that may or may not work, but will still drag everyone close, and if it does, it won't do really any good for them or for the people they're protesting against.
That's absolutely a fact. You know what? They didn't know what they were protesting against. They really didn't. They didn't care. They didn't care. They thought they were protesting for a cause. Well, I would like for somebody to explain to me what their cause was. Explain that to those 58,000 brave men and women on that wall in Washington, D.C. Explain it to their families. Explain it to their children, their kids, their mothers, their dads, their brothers, their sisters. Explain it. Somebody explain to me, what were they protesting against? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Then, another questions is,